Good evening, everybody. I'm Randy Ray, and I will be your literate Texan tonight. And tonight's video is titled, I wrote this down so I'd get it right, The 100 Best Modern Novels of All Time, magazine. Let me explain to you what that means, okay? So, in 2023, Time magazine created a list of the 100 best novels that had been published since 1923. 1923 is the year that Time magazine started. So these are quite literally the 100 best novels since the dawn of Time magazine. And and this is exclusively novels. Doesn't matter where they were written, but they were in English. At the time, Time magazine had two movie critics, and they had decided on this list together. And one of the movie critics is Lev Grossman, who happens to be one of my favorite fantasy novelists. He's terrific. And the other critic, and I have to look, and I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce this correctly, is Richard Lacayo. And when they first made their list, they each made a list of 100 greatest novels. And apparently they have pretty similar sensibilities because 80 of their titles matched. So they only had to negotiate the other 20 titles. And then there might be some surprising names missing, but when you're limited to 100 titles, that's liable to happen. For example, and it happens for various reasons. For example, they agreed that while Gore Vidal is terrific, and probably several of his novels might have qualified for this list, Gore Vidal's real contribution to American letters during that time period was his nonfiction, his collections of essays. Now, I've gone through lists of 100 novels or 100 books before, and they always seem to be real popular content on my channel here. People watch them and they watch the whole thing all the way through. But what I do is, the ones that I've heard of, I'll tell you what I've heard about them. The ones that I haven't heard of, I look up and read a little bit about and decide whether or not I want to put it on my TBR. And then also, I've generally read some of them, but usually I'm demonstrating how woefully underread I really am, because my guess is, and I have not looked or counted, my guess is that I will recognize there'll be about 20 of these that I've read. That's going to be my guess, okay? So anyway, starting with the first one, The Adventures of Augie March. I knew a guy in high school named Augie, and I just thought it was a funny name, Augie. It did not occur to me that Augie was short for Augustus, that it was a nickname for Augustus. And I have not read this novel, but here's what Richard Lacayo wrote about it here. Augie comes on stage with one of literature's most famous opening lines. I am an American, Chicago-born, and go at things as I've taught myself, freestyle, and will make the record in my own way. First to knock, first admitted. It's the Call Me Ishmael of mid-20th century American fiction. I don't know, that doesn't seem like such a great opening line to me, but it's all right. I haven't read it. I don't know what it's about. Saul Bellow wrote it. It was published in 1953. So I might add it to my TBR, I might not. We'll see later. The next one on the list is All the King's Men. This is number 2 of our 100 best novels. All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren. Now, I do have this book, and I have read it. I read it in high school, and I've read it multiple times since high school because it's wonderful. If you haven't read All the King's Men, you definitely should. And more than just a classic political novel, Warren's tale of power and corruption in the Depression-era South is a sustained meditation on the unforeseen consequences of every human act, the vexing connectedness of all people, and the possibility, and it's not much of one, of goodness in a sinful world. Willie Stark is Warren's lightly disguised version of Huey Long, the one-time Louisiana strongman governor. Anyway, terrific book. Highly recommend it. And you know what? It's going on my TBR for a reread because I haven't read it in a long time, and I just have an absolutely beautiful edition of it in a slipcover that I just love holding on to and stuff. So that's a really good one. The next one on the list is American Pastoral by Philip Roth, which was published in 1997. I have a copy of this laying around here somewhere, as I do many Philip Roth novels, and it remains unread, as do many of my Philip Roth novels. So it's already on my TBR, but no, I haven't read it. To decipher the late 1960s, through the story of Swede Lvov, whose life is cast into the fires of those years. Roth calls again upon the saturnine side of his disposition. So that sounds pretty good to me. 1997 is when that one came out. An American Tragedy is next on the list by Theodore Dreiser. This is already on my TBR. I haven't read it yet. Came out in 1925. Clyde Griffith is a young man with ambitions. He's in love with a rich girl, just like Billy Joel, right? Uptown Girl. You get the reference, I know. But it's a poor girl he has gotten pregnant. Robert Alden, who works with him at his uncle's factory. Roberta Alden, it's not Robert Alden. That wouldn't make sense. One day he takes Roberta canoeing on a lake with the intention of killing her. And from there, his fate is sealed. Okay, now that one sounds good. I want to read this. It is definitely going on my list. Next, Animal Farm, which I have read. It's by George Orwell, who I generally like. I do not care for the novel Animal Farm, but I have read it. So that's 2 out of 100 that I've read so far. No writer has ever been more naked in his contempt for power or more ruthless in his critique of those who abuse it than the Englishman-born Eric Blair, better known to the world as George Orwell. And just this last month, I read a book by George Orwell called Down and Out in Paris and London, and it was terrific. I loved 1984 when I read it in 1984. And so I have everything by George Orwell. I might give Animal Farm another look. If I'm going to be reading or rereading his entire oeuvre again, I might as well give it a look. The next one on the list, Appointment in Samara by John O'Hara, 1934. Don't know much about this one. O'Hara did for fictional Gibbsville, Pennsylvania, what Faulkner did for Yoknapatawpha County, Mississippi. Surveyed its social life and drew its psychic outlines. But he did it in utterly worldly terms without Faulkner's taste for mythic inference or the basso profundo of his prose. Okay, I don't know if that sounds good or not. Let me know in the comments if I should read that or not. Maybe you've read it. The next on the list is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume. Came out in 1970. I remember seeing this in the library at school. You know, it's not a young adult novel, or maybe it is a young adult novel, but it seemed to me like it was for little kids. It also seemed to me like it was aimed more at women than men. You could almost hear the collective generational sigh of relief in 1970 when Bloom published this groundbreaking, taboo-trampling young adult novel, finally a book that talks frankly about sex without being prim or prurient, and about religion without scolding or condescending. And a few months shy of her 12th birthday, Margaret Simon is starting school in a new town and asking God some serious questions. Like, when is she going to get her period? What bra should she buy? And if her mom is Jewish and her dad is Christian, is she supposed to join the Y or the Jewish Community Center? Anyway, that one looks good. I might give that a read. It certainly won't take long to read, being a young adult novel and stuff. The next one on the list is The Assistant by Bernard Malamud. I've read Bernard Malamud. I believe he wrote The Natural, which I've read, and I really liked. Malamud was a writer who always had one eye fixed on the eternal and one on the here and now. That sounds good. The eternal was the realm of moral quandaries. The here and now was usually a world of struggling 20th century Jews. It was his genius to show the two constantly intersecting. In this book, his masterpiece, Morris Bober is a woebegone neighborhood grocer whose modest store is failing and whose luck actually takes a turn for the worse when he is held up by masked hoodlums. Or is it worse? When a stranger appears and offers to work without pay for the experience, it doesn't take long for the reader to realize that the stranger is one of the men who robbed Bober. But just what are his motives in returning? Okay, this sounds really good. This is definitely going on my list. This came out in 1957. Next on the list, Flann O'Brien's novel At Swim Two Birds. Now, I've heard about this one, and I've heard good things, but I haven't read it, and I don't know about it specifically. O'Brien, in real life, Irishman Brian O'Nolan, would have been disappointed if anybody could come up with a coherent summary of this brilliant, beer-soaked miniature masterpiece. One of the best-kept secrets of 20th century literature, At Swim Two Birds is ostensibly a novel about a lazy, impoverished college student who's writing a novel. One beginning and one ending for a book is a thing I did not agree with, he opines. But his characters won't stay put, and they get mixed up with all kinds of local Dublin types and figures out of Gaelic myth. It's like Ulysses played out in a comic mode on a more human scale. Dylan Thomas said of it, "This is just the book to give your sister if she is a loud, dirty, boozy girl. Even better to keep it for yourself." Okay, this sounds good. I want to read it. That came out in 1938. The next on the list is Atonement by Ian McEwan. I believe I started the movie and stopped. I was bored by the film. That could have just been my mood that afternoon. I don't know anything about the book. A Magnificent Deception. Bryony Tallis, the intricate English girl at the center of Atonement, is a budding writer. Ever notice that writers write a lot of books about fellow writers? At the age of 13, she believes that through her powers of invention and language, an unruly world could be made just so. In a complicated way, she turns out to be right, but only after she turns out to be catastrophically wrong. Okay, this sounds terrific. I'm in. They've sold me on it already. That's Atonement by Ian McEwan, which came out in 2002, which I haven't read. The next one on the list is Beloved by Toni Morrison, which came out in 1987. I have not read Beloved. I always think that I've read it, but the only Toni Morrison novel that I've read is not Beloved. It's Sula. I've read Sula. Beloved is described thusly. This is Lev Grossman who wrote this one. Seth, or Sethi, or Seth, I don't know how you pronounce it, is an escaped slave in post-Civil War Ohio. Her body is scarred from the atrocities of her white owners, but it's her memories that really torture her. She killed her 2-year-old daughter, Beloved, so the child would never know the sufferings of a life of servitude. Well, this sounds grim. But in Morrison's novels, the present is never safe from the past, and Beloved returns as an angry, hungry ghost. Okay, that sounds good. I'm in. I'll read that. Putting it on my to-be-read list. Next on the list. The Berlin Stories by Christopher, I believe it's Isherwood, but it might be Isherwood. If you got a correction for me on any pronunciation at all, please feel free to put it in the comments. Came out in 1946. The Berlin Stories. I am a camera with its shutter open. There's something unmistakably 20th century about this. The opening line to Goodbye to Berlin. In their coolness and clarity and melancholy detachment, these words express more about a moment in time than most entire novels do. Berlin Stories is not quite a novel. It's actually 2 short novels stuck together. The Laughter of Mr. Norris and Goodbye to Berlin. But they form one coherent snapshot of a lost world, the antic, cosmopolitan Berlin of the 1930s, where jolly expatriates dance faster and faster, as if that would save them from the creeping rise of Nazism. Okay, this sounds good. I'm in. Next, The Big Sleep. You see me marking my page there? That's because I've read The Big Sleep. I've read The Big Sleep multiple times, in fact. It's Raymond Chandler novel, came out in 1939, was famously made into a movie starring Humphrey Bogart. And yeah, it's terrific, but it's incomprehensible. The book's incomprehensible. The movie's incomprehensible. I think I read somewhere that Raymond Chandler joked that he didn't know who killed anybody in the novel either, that he couldn't follow the plot. Here is what it says here. I was neat, clean-shaved, and sober, and I didn't care who knew it. I was everything the well-dressed private detective ought to be. When it comes to writing great prose set in private detective novels, you just can't beat Raymond Chandler. He's terrific. And I think he only wrote 7 novels, sadly enough. This sentence from the first paragraph of The Big Sleep marks the last time you can be fully confident that you know what's going on. Well, that's the truth. It's a baffling novel. I've tried taking notes. I've tried reading it really slowly. I've tried reading each chapter twice before moving on to the next chapter. I've tried reading the entire novel twice in succession. And believe it or not, it's still a terrific book. In spite of being incomprehensible, it's still terrific. And if you don't believe me, try reading it for yourself and you'll see. He was 51 years old when he wrote this, and he was a former oil company executive. It's a mosaic of shadows, a dark tracery of forking paths. Anyway, it's good. It's due for a reread anytime now. And it's one of the ones that I've read. The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood is the next one. It came out in the year 2000. Most people probably know Margaret Atwood because she wrote The Handmaid's Tale. Frosty reserved Iris and her hot-blooded sister Laura. I like it already. I want to find out more about hot-blooded Laura here. They grow up wealthy and privileged in a chilly Canadian town. But when the family fortune falters in the Depression, Iris is married off to a cruel industrialist, and Laura drives her car off a bridge, leaving behind a pulpy science fiction novel, presented in parallel to the primary plot, that seems to contain a coded, masked guide to the secrets that ruled her life and brought about her early death. Told in the brittle, acerbic voice of the elderly Iris, who is left behind to decode Laura's legacy, The Blind Assassin is a tour de force of nested narratives, subtle reveals, and buried memories. God, that sounds really good to me. What do you think? Should I read that this year? That's going on my list. That sounds terrific. Next on the list, we're still in the B's. We haven't gotten very far in this list, but it seems like we have. Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy from 1986. Came out the same year as Lonesome Dove, which I love. I have tried to read Blood Meridian 3 or 4 times now. I've never managed to finish it. Will I try again? I don't know. It's hard to read. I wish they'd let me copy edit the book and add some punctuation. I don't know. Part of me wants to wake Cormac McCarthy up from the dead and tell him, look, man, if you want me to be bothered with reading your novel, you've got to be bothered with punctuating it. The floor of the playa lay smooth and unbroken by any track, and the mountains and their blue islands stood footless in the void like floating temples. Okay, he does have a knack for the language. McCarthy's prose has the character of the landscape it describes, harsh and pure, as if it had been sculpted by wind and sand, like a naturally occurring phenomenon. In Blood Meridian, McCarthy uses it to spin a yarn of Gothic violence. In the 1840s, a young boy joins a band of cutthroats who hunt Indians on the border between Texas and Mexico under the leadership of an amoral albino arch monster known as the Judge. Okay, the Judge is an interesting character. I like the Judge. And rarely has literature presented spectacles of violence more extreme or less gratuitous. Blood Meridian sums up shadows of Dante and Melville and demands of every reader that they re-examine why and how they cling to morality in a fallen world. It sounds pretty deep and heavy, and it probably is. I can't imagine it's going to replace Lonesome Dove as my favorite Western, but I may give it yet another try this year. And I'll tell you why. I've got so many friends whose taste I respect in literature who absolutely adore this book and everything else that Cormac McCarthy has written. And I like some of what I've read of Cormac McCarthy. My first Cormac McCarthy book was The Road, which I actually liked very much. I mean, it's grim, it's depressing, but I enjoyed it. And the movies that have been made from his novels have been good too. No Country for Old Men in particular, I really like. Next, Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh, 1946. I recognize the title, but I don't really know anything about the book. Once and only once in his career, the bitter, urbane, howlingly funny satirist Evelyn Waugh screwed up all his nerve and his talent and produced a genuine literary masterpiece. That's hard to turn down. Though it's saddled with a faded dolly of a title, Brideshead Revisited is actually a wildly entertaining, swooningly funny sad story about an impressionable young man, Charles Ryder, who goes to Oxford in the 1930s and falls in love with a family. The wealthy, eccentric, aristocratic Flights, owners of a grand old country house called Brideshead. In the first half of the book, the exquisite, hilariously fey Sebastian Flight, who's Charles's classmate, teaches the young man about beauty, booze, and witty conversation. This sounds like a conversation I would have liked to have been part of. In the second half, everyone grows up and everything goes spectacularly to smash. Told in flashbacks from the dark days of World War II, Brideshead is a glimmer with the guttering candle glow of an elegant age that was already passing away. Okay, that sounds pretty good. You know, I'm on the fence about a lot of these, but they all sound pretty good. And I'm starting to wonder how much of that has to do with the quality of the people writing the reviews, because I know Lev Grossman is a terrific writer. The next one on the list, The Bridge of San Luis Rey by Thornton Wilder, published in 1927. Whatever happened to Wilder? He was a lion in his day, prized Pulitzer Prize, as this book was, a star of stage and page. Today, notwithstanding the occasional production of Our Town, which I've been thinking about a little bit because I read that book last year and it featured Our Town really prominently, but I can't remember the name of the book, or The Skin of Our Teeth, which I've never heard of. I've heard of the phrase, but I've never heard of the novel or anything. He's ever in danger of falling out of fashion. He seems too courtly, too composed. For proof of how powerful those qualities can be, there's this book. In 1714, the finest bridge in all Peru collapses and 5 people plunge to their deaths. Brother Juniper, a Franciscan missionary, decides to track down their individual stories to prove that even what seems to be random misfortunes are consistent with God's plan. That his discoveries turn out to be more complex will come as no surprise. What may surprise are the beguilements of Wilder's teasing, ironic, beautifully written tale, unlike anything else in American fiction. Okay, that sounds really good. That's definitely going on in the TBR. There's a lot of maybes on this one, but this one's a definite. The Bridge of San Luis Rey by Thornton Wilder. Next, Call It Sleep. So now we're in the C's, and so far I've only read 3 of these books. Call It Sleep was written by Henry Roth and published in 1935. New York City, 1911. A young, painfully sensitive boy named David is growing up in the grimy Jewish slums of the Lower East Side with his unemployable rageaholic father and his angelic, nurturing mother. Call It Sleep has the setting of a gritty, naturalistic political novel, and it works perfectly well as such. But it is, at heart, a profoundly interior book. Roth tirelessly and unflinchingly records the daily damage that the harshness of slum life inflicts on David's quivering, receptive, emotionally defenseless consciousness as a precise chronicler of minute impressions and of the growth of an intellectually precocious mind. Roth's only equal is James Joyce. After its publication in 1934, Call It Sleep sank from view for 30 years before a new edition became a bestseller in the 1960s. It will never be forgotten again. Okay, sounds really good again. It's going on the list. Catch-22. I just bought a copy of Catch-22 to add to my list, so it's definitely on my TBR already. Written by Joseph Heller, published in 1961. I can tell you already the summary sounds fantastic because that's why I put it on here. Put it on my TBR list already. Captain John Yossarian is a bomber pilot who's just trying to make it through World War II alive. But the only excuse the Army will accept for refusing to fly a mission is insanity. And if Yossarian refuses to fly, he is by definition sane. This is the self-devouring, logical worm that lies at the heart of Catch-22. The story of Yossarian, his colleagues, who respond to the horrors of war with a range of serial comic neuroses and psychoses, and his superiors, who respond to the horrors of war by sending Yossarian on ever more pointless and dangerous missions for the purpose of enhancing their own reputations. Catch-22 is a bitter, anguished joke of a novel that embraces the existential absurdity of war without ever quite succumbing to it. Okay, that sounds really good. And yeah, I'm just as determined to read that this year as I was before I read this. Next, The Catcher in the Rye. Okay, there's another one that I have read and liked a lot better as a 20-year-old than I did as a 40-year-old. It's probably due for a reread. It's written by J.D. Salinger. It's published in 1951. No matter how many high school English teachers try to domesticate The Catcher in Rye in class, it will never lose its satirical edge. When Holden Caulfield learns he's going to be kicked out of yet another private school, he bails in the middle of the night. "Sleep tight, you morons," he yells, and heads to New York City to bum around for a few days, hitting on girls, thinking about his dead brother, worrying about where the ducks go in the wintertime before he deals with his parents. The time passes in an agony of anhedonia. I know what that word means. Do you know what anhedonia means? It's the inability to feel pleasure. An agony of anhedonia that transcends the merely adolescent. It's a permanent reminder of the sweetness of childhood, the hypocrisy of the adult world, and the strange no man's land that lies in between. Yeah, it's a classic for a reason. It's well written, and I like everything I've read from J.D. Salinger, but I definitely liked it better as a 20-year-old when I could relate to it more than as a 40-year-old. I think a lot of books are like that. I can definitely relate to The Great Gatsby more now than I could as a young man for some reason, which is odd because The The Great Gatsby is kind of about a young man. I mean, it's not about a 55-year-old man by any means, but I still like it. A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess, published in 1963. Okay, so I've seen the movie A Clockwork Orange. I didn't think I would like it, but I did like the movie very much. Still haven't read the book. May or may not read it. I'm not crazy about Anthony Burgess's writing. I know that makes me a weirdo or something. Everybody else I know that has an opinion worth respecting seems to like Burgess. But like 1984, this is a book in which an entire social order is implied through language. And what language? To hint at the vile universe of the 15-year-old delinquent Alex and his murderous buddies, Burgess created Nadsat, a rich, futuristic patois. Cine for cinema, Vidi for see, horror show for good, from the Russian Korosho, which gives you some idea of which political system has prevailed. The words locate him in a world of corrupted values, violence, and boundless infantile indulgence. His drug is Milk Plus. When Alex is apprehended by the authorities and subjected to psychological conditioning to make him nauseated at any impulse towards violence, Burgess's book becomes a meditation on whether a world in which evil can be freely chosen might still be preferable to one in which goodness is compelled. Stanley Kubrick's coldly magnificent cine adaptation has sometimes threatened to overshadow the great novel, but don't let it happen. Yeah, that's right. It was a Stanley Kubrick film. I've seen all of Kubrick's films, every dang one of them. The Confessions of Nat Turner is next. That was written by William Styron, published in 1967. Never heard of it. It's a novel that has its sources in history, the only sustained slave revolt in American history, an 1831 uprising led by Turner, an educated slave who led a group of fellow escapees on a bloody trail through southeastern Virginia. Before they were stopped, just short of seizing an arsenal, they had killed about 60 whites. And before he was hanged, Turner dictated a final testament, a document that still exists. But Styron's book is not that one. It's an invented version of that text, one ringed with bitterness and fire. Okay, that sounds good. He plumbs the mind of a man who believed himself ordained to slaughter whites in retribution for the ordeals of slavery, but who found himself nearly incapable of putting in the blade. Turner, as Styron imagines him, is not a plaster saint, not a cardboard monster. He's a man, one whose ferocious yearnings were formed in the cauldron of a hateful institution. Okay, this sounds really good. Next, The Corrections. This one's by Jonathan Franzen, published in 2001. I've read 80% of The Corrections, but I never finished it. And if I were to go back and read it again, which I might, I would start all over at the beginning because it's been several years and I don't really remember much about it, other than it had what seemed to me like an Ann Tyler type family that never seemed to quite be able to get along. If family is a machine for making you crazy, has there ever been a machine better oiled than the Lamberts? That's a good opening line to a book review. The elderly father, Alfred, is a retired railway engineer sliding into the mental and physical chaos of Parkinson's disease. Oof. I've got a couple of friends with Parkinson's disease. It's brutal. Wife Enid fashions ever more ingenious varieties of denial. The son Chip is helping con men in Lithuania. His brother Gary is consoling himself with booze for the miseries of his own disintegrating home life. Their sister Denise, in the time she can spare from her career as a celebrity chef, makes reckless thrusts into other people's marriages. Their miseries are an opening onto the larger discontents of the society that we live in. But Franzen keeps his terrible focus on the family. This can be a very funny book in places, but the laughs come hard, very hard. And I do remember that. I do remember it was very funny in places. Next, The Crying of Lot 49. This is a Thomas Pynchon book that came out in 1966. I believe it was his first. I didn't understand it. I never finished it because I just didn't get it. I couldn't get it. And maybe I need to give it another try. Maybe I need to go slower, find a guide, or read more about it online. I don't know. But yeah, no, it didn't do anything for me. And I don't know if it's going on my TBR. I'm sure there are people watching this video who think it's just fabulous. I'm sure there's people on this TBR who hate it. I think this is a love it or hate it novel. But yeah, Thomas Pynchon. Next, A Dance to the Music of Time. This one's written by Anthony Powell, published in 1951. I've never heard of it. The words 12 novel cycle don't exactly inspire readerly zeal in most people. But once you catch the rhythm of Powell's dodecahedral masterpiece, it's hard to put it down. Okay, so it's a 12 novel cycle? I think I'm interested. Beginning in the 1920s, A Dance to the Music of Time follows the lives of a group of English friends and acquaintances as they make their various ways through life, meeting and partying, succeeding and failing, loving and hating, living and dying. There is ample room for both comedy and tragedy in this capacious, large-hearted work, but Powell's real triumph is the way he catches the rhythm of fate itself, the way it brings people together only to spin them apart, then reunite them later as near strangers, transformed in unexpected ways by the intervening years. I have noticed this in my life, okay? And mostly it's with former romantic connections, but they always come back. People always keep coming back in my life. They never stay gone. And this is true of men too. It's not just women, but it is largely women. I've probably made a lot more friends in my life that were women, and there was usually a romantic aspect to each of those relationships that's come and gone. Just recently, the girl I dated when I was 19 years old and she was 24, she come rolling back around, wanted to go out with me, and she's married. But, and she's a terrific lady, but I told her, I said, don't leave your husband just so you can go have dinner with me. Trust me. It's been 31 years since we've seen each other. But I digress. Anyway, that sounds like a good book, A Dance to the Music of Time. And it sounds like a theme that I can relate to, people coming back into your life. Next, The Day of the Locust by Nathaniel West, published in 1939. Okay, so I don't know anything about this one either. Although the title makes me think it's some kind of 1950s horror movie about giant insects. Nathaniel West's Hollywood novel takes place mostly at the margins of the movie kingdom, the universe of set painters and extras, frustrated small-timers, hangers-on, and oddities. There are prostitutes here, transplanted Eskimos, a failed comic who sells silver polish door to door so that he can force luckless customers to watch his act. No one in this book has, I like the idea of that. I love the idea that there's a guy out there selling silver polish to people just so he can force them to watch his comedy act, which is apparently terrible. That sounds great. No one in this book has found the promise that California was supposed to offer. And at the end, their anger and resentments collect into a riot in the streets that is the sum of their individual discontents. Okay, this sounds good. I'm in. What's going on the TBR? Death Comes for the Archbishop by Willa Cather, 1927. I've heard of Willa Cather. I'm not exactly sure who she is. Not heard of this book. Cather at her most matter-of-fact and as a consequent, her most powerful. She based this book on the life of Bishop Jean-Baptiste Lamy. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. She calls him Father Latour. Okay, I'm mispronouncing his name. Makes it even worse. The French-born Ohio cleric who was assigned by the church to rebuild the faith in New Mexico after the territory was annexed by the U.S. in 1831. With an old friend, Father Valent, Latour sets out for Santa Fe. He will find the church there to be fragmented and corrupt, with priests taking wives and charging exorbitant fees to perform marriages. Latour embarks on a decades-long effort to reform and reinvigorate the diocese. The style and structure of this book are strange, unemphatic, as if Cather had simply laid the scenes side by side in a tapestry. This sounds really good for some reason. I don't know why it sounds so good, but it does. She compared the book to a legend in which no event is given much dramatic weight. If this sounds like a formula for boredom, it's not. His serene language, with its immemorial simplicity, gives the story a weight mere drama could never provide. So yeah, that's going on the TBR. I think most of these are going to go on my TBR. Maybe I'll just read them all next year. Next, A Death in the Family by James Agee, 1958. Not to be confused with the Batman storyline from 1985. Or maybe it was 1986, I don't remember. A Death in the Family. Agee was a poet, a penetrating film critic for Time and other magazines. Okay, so I've read his film criticism. In fact, I used to have a couple of books that collected his movie reviews, if I'm not mistaken. He was an intricate public conscience and a man who carried all his life the burden of his father's death in a car accident when Agee was 6 years old. 40 years later to the day, Agee would die of a heart attack. He brought all of that, both of his gifts and his psychic injuries, to this grave and lyrical story of Rufus Follett, a boy whose world is upended by his father's sudden death in an auto accident. What this book lacks in form, it more than makes up for in subtly delineated feeling. Agee's forgiving embrace of the deeply imperfect people he describes, a kind of Whitman-esque tenderness, stays with you for a long time. Okay, that sounds really good. Yeah, I'm in. There's so many great books out there that I haven't read yet, that I am, as Harold Bloom said, reading against the clock, because I want to hang around long enough to read all these books that I haven't read yet. And we're still only in the D's. The next, The Death of the Heart by Elizabeth Bowen, published in 1958. Portia Quain, I don't know anything about this. Portia Quain is that most dangerous commodity, an innocent child. At 16, after years of dragging around European hotels with her parents, she's been orphaned. She finds herself now in the care of her prosperous older half-brother and his reluctant wife. Is she a reluctant wife, or is she reluctant to take care of the kid? That's what I don't know. What they and their heedless friends will show to Portia in the disenchanted kingdom of adulthood. But Bowen's real genius was in recognizing what Portia will show to them. In the mirror of her innocent eyes, experience will catch a glimpse of its own reflection. It's not a pretty picture. Okay, that sounds good enough. I'll read it. Next, Deliverance. I've seen the movie. It's on my TBR already. James Dickey, 1970. I think most people know what the storyline about this is. But 4 friends set out on a canoe trip through backwoods Georgia, a lark, a weekend's diversion, a blissful, beery break from their day jobs. But their itinerary unexpectedly swings into darker territory when they meet a gang of savage, sodomitical mountain men. Sodomitical. Okay, that's got the word sodomy in it. I knew that, though, because I've seen the movie. And by the time they emerge again, most of them from the wilderness, they've been through some of the blackest terrain, both geographical and spiritual, since Marlowe went up the river in Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Though it's been partially eclipsed by the movie version, you know it because of the dueling banjo scene, which is terrific. The original Deliverance is a visceral, dangerous thriller packed with forbidden knowledge. Definitely on my TBR list. Next, Dog Soldiers by Robert Stone, published in 1974. Okay, now I've seen a movie called Dog Soldiers, but it's about werewolves. I don't think it was based on this novel, but let's see what this says here. A weird current pulses through this book. The tale of a heroin deal gone very bad. It's also a merciless picture of America at the ragged end of the Vietnam era. Okay, this is definitely not the movie I saw. John Converse is a journalist preparing to head home from Saigon when he's persuaded to join a dope smuggling scheme. Once back in California, he's ambushed by a pair of ex-cons in the service of a corrupt federal drug agent who wants to pocket the drugs. The hapless goons, who also indulge in occasional sex with each other, drag Converse on a trek across the Southwest in search of the strung-out intriguers who are actually holding the stuff. Forgive me, I'm hydrated. Those would be Converse's wife, Marge, who's blandly stupefied by prescription drugs, and his sad sack Confederate Hicks. Do we need to tell you it all ends badly? Or that the heroin is a stand-in for Vietnam? It's the poison that came home, like the war, to pollute an already bleak and sawtooth social landscape. Bleakness is all in Stone's world, which is unrelenting and unforgettable. I got to tell you, if you're writing a novel and it's got to do with heroin, it's going to be like that. I have a friend who's a heroin addict, and it's awful, just awful. Next, Falconer. We're down into the F's. Falconer was written by John Cheever, a name I'm familiar with. 1977 is the publication date. A story of suffering and redemption told in Cheever's fullest register. Ezekiel Farragut, university professor, family man, drug addict, is in Falconer State Prison for having killed his brother with a poker. Okay, this sounds good. In this shabby purgatory, he struggles with his memories, his guilt, and his need to remain human in a dehumanizing place until an affair with a fellow prisoner reawakens his ability to love, even if the young man is a cynical operator and love is just another burden to bear. In some ways, this book represented Cheever going far afield from the suburbs where he'd made his name. Not too far. Sing Sing was near his home in Ossining, New York. He had taught prisoners there in the early 70s. That's interesting. But Farragut is not so indifferent from Cheever's lawn-mowing householders. Yearning, wayward, beset by anger and need, he's just a Cheever character in extremis. He suffers beautifully, but he suffers to a purpose. When he finds a rapprochement with the world, however tenuous, it speaks to the prisoner in us all. Sounds really good. Don't have a copy of it, but I'm going to get one. Next, The French Lieutenant's Woman by John Fowles, published in 1969. I do have a copy of this one. It's already on my TBR, and I can't believe I haven't gotten to it already because I've heard so much good stuff about it. A magnificent game of a novel, one in which the brilliant postmodern contrivances actually add to the poignancy of its anguished Victorian characters. Charles Smithson is an amateur paleontologist living on the southwestern coast of England. Ernestina is his dreary, upright fiancée. Sarah Woodruff is an enigmatic local governess, said to be pining for a French soldier who has misused her. The fourth major figure in this book is not a character, but the author. By no means all-powerful, he discovers early on that he has lost control of his characters and proposes, in that case, to let them have their freedom. And he means it. The story proceeds through alternative episodes. In one, Charles marries Ernestina. In another, he doesn't. In multiple endings, with the author sometimes turning up to walk among his characters and comment tartly on their actions. In its final pages, don't dare to call them a conclusion in a book so open-ended. What could that word mean? He opens a vista onto freedom that's both dazzling and devastating. God, I got to read this book, and I got to read it soon. It sounds so good. Next, The Golden Notebook, Doris Lessing, 1962. Don't know anything about this, although I've read stuff by Doris Lessing before. I couldn't tell you what. I don't remember it. Anna Wolf is a writer who keeps 4 notebooks, each a different color, each reflecting a different part of her. The black one contains recollections of her youthful wartime years in West Africa, experiences that went into her first novel. In the red one, she reflects on her later life in London's leftist and intellectual circles. The blue notebook analyzes her fraught relations with men. The yellow notebook contains her fragmentary attempts at new fiction. With the fifth, The Golden Notebook, and with The Golden Notebook, Wolf Lessing struggles to tie all the threads fearlessly back together again. All the currents of her time flow through Anna. Marx and Freud and the burgeoning dissatisfaction among women that would eventually explode into feminism. Lessing's earnestness can be too much at times, but as a portrait of a woman coming to grips with the realities of her time, her book is indispensable. Sounds good. Next, Go Tell It on the Mountain. James Baldwin, 1953. For his ferocious, what does that word mean? For his ferocious debut novel, Baldwin reaches back to his experiences as a teenage Pentecostal preacher in Harlem and sets them down in language steeped in the high and mighty rhetoric of Scripture. At age 14, John Grimes is bedeviled by the new stirrings in his treacherous and bewildering body, and resentful of his preacher stepfather, once an energetic sinner, whose dual nature is now divided between the dutiful but restless John and John's older brother, Roy, another hellraiser in training. The boy's mother, Elizabeth, labors to keep the passions of her men in check, all the while holding secrets of her own. Their stories run dark and deep, while the fierce music of Baldwin's voice courses through the stories and lends them majesty. Okay, that sounds good. I want to read it. Gone with the Wind is next by Margaret Mitchell, 1936. My grandmother, I don't know how well-read she was. I don't think she was particularly well-read. She worked hard all her life. But my grandmother lived 2 blocks from my house. And she had 4 books that I can recall in her house, okay? One was the Bible. She had a big family Bible. And the next one was Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell, which apparently she loved that novel. And she had the sequel to it, Scarlet, which by all accounts is not very good. And she had a copy of a book called Peck's Bad Boy. And I don't know if anybody's heard of Peck's Bad Boy. Every time I tell this story to people in person, they have no clue what I'm talking about. But Peck's Bad Boy was about a man named Peck who had a little boy. And the little boy was always misbehaving. And he didn't have a name other than Peck's Bad Boy, to my best of my recollection. But each chapter was a story about Peck's bad boy getting into trouble. My grandmother just thought it was hilarious. I think whoever wrote Peck's Bad Boy was kind of probably a low-rent Mark Twain type character. But anyway, Gone with the Wind is one I'd like to one I'd like to read. I almost watched it not too long ago. I had an ex-girlfriend come visit for the night one night. She wanted to know if she could stay and watch Gone with the Wind. I said, hey, that movie's 5 hours long. You'll be here all night. And she said, I know. I didn't stay up and watch it with her. I went to sleep. Next, The Grapes of Wrath, which I have read and I've seen the movie version. And I love. It was one of the first adult novels that I ever read, in fact. Right up there with The Lord of the Rings and The World According to Garp. Those were some of my first adult novels that I've read, but I remember really loving The Grapes of Wrath and reading it multiple times, even though I didn't quite understand all of it. I think I understand all of it now, but it's definitely time for a reread. I prefer East of Eden and Travels with Charlie to this one. I also really liked Sweet Thursday, which I thought was just a lovely book. I don't know. I haven't read anything by John Steinbeck I didn't like. But The Grapes of Wrath is about a family called the Jodes during the Dust Bowl. And, you know, they travel out to California to get jobs picking fruit. But it's all about being poor. And, you know, as Charles Bukowski once pointed out, nobody suffers like the poor. Next, Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon. Here's another one from Thomas Pynchon. This one's even more complicated and hard to understand. Although the first line, anytime the first line of a review starts with, no, it's not unreadable, I don't know. That doesn't inspire confidence in me. For most of its 700 plus pages, okay, now you're telling me that it's not unreadable, but it's also 700 pages. I'm getting very scared here. It's so crazily, scarily, sumptuously readable that you hate to put it aside even as the last paragraph thunders down on your head. Yeah, I'm probably going to give it another shot and read it. You know, I'm a better reader than I was the last time I tried to read it, but there's no guarantees in life, are there? Next, The Great Gatsby, one of my favorite novels, if not my favorite novel. That's 6, by the way, that I've read on this list. But The Great Gatsby was published in 1925, which means, of course, that this is the 100-year birthday of the book The Great Gatsby, written by F. Scott Fitzgerald. It's absolutely terrific, wonderful. I can't say enough good things about The Great Gatsby. I even like the movie from Baz Luhrmann, which a lot of people are going to gasp and say, no, Randy, please say it ain't so. But yeah, no, The Great Gatsby, it's hard to beat. It's like a drum with a hole in it. It's hard to beat. A Handful of Dust is next by Evelyn Waugh, 1934. Haven't heard of this one before, but I love the title. Devoted to his wife Brenda, his son John Andrew, and to Hetton, his very ugly neo-Gothic homestead, Tony Last will lose all three. As his name is always announcing, Last lives at the end of a dying age. The brittle, exhausted 1930s when England, at least was England, is a place where Brenda can throw herself at the feet of a childish lover and where Last can discard his life on an absurd caprice. Waugh's own marriage was disintegrating when he wrote this, and his unhappiness led him into wider realms of feeling, pathos, and rage than any you will find in his earlier triumphs of nasty wit. Sound dreary? Not even slightly. If this is Waugh at his bleakest, it's also Waugh at his deepest, most poisonously funny. Okay, yeah, sold me on this one too, guys. Next, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers. Have not read the novel, but I've seen the movie multiple times, and it's a fabulous movie. Alan Arkin's in it. When Carson McCullers was a teenager, she came to New York City to study piano at Juilliard. She never matriculated. She lost the purse with the tuition money in it. Oh, man. Such small, unredressed tragedies as these are at the silent, solitary heart of McCullers' first novel, which centers on a deaf mute and a teenage tomboy living in a small Georgia town in the 1930s. McCullers' characters reach out to one another for sympathy and understanding, but not all of them can complete the connection, and their isolated thoughts form a choir of amazing, transcendent poignance. Music only the reader can hear. Yeah, so I'd like to read that just because I love the movie so much. Next, The Heart of the Matter by Graham Greene, published in 1948. I love Graham Greene. One of my goals before I die, one of my bucket list goals as a reader is to read all of Graham Greene. I think it's going to take a while. He wrote a lot of books. This one I don't know anything about. He felt the loyalty we all feel to unhappiness, the sense that there is where we really belong. Nobody could do objection like Greene, and no one could parse moral dilemmas with quite his eye for the subtle ways that Satan persuades the righteous. That's a great sentence. Henry Scobie is one of his supreme creations, a British colonial police officer stationed during World War II in a damp, vulture-ridden West African town. God, a vulture-ridden town. Doesn't that sound like a setting? A Roman Catholic, mindful of his duties to God, Scobie thinks of himself as incorruptible, but he has not counted on the power of his own excesses of pity to beguile him. Oh, this sounds really good. To deliver his wife from unhappiness, he is led into complicity with smugglers. To save a young woman from despair, but no less to save himself, he is drawn into adultery. To rescue them both from his misjudgments, he is led to betray his God. A man for whom humility becomes a kind of perverse pride arrives at a place where he wills his own damnations as the one means to escape his earthly predicaments. God, that sounds terrific. I'm so in. Next, Herzog by Saul Bellow, 1964. Like Binks Bowling in Percy's The Moviegoer, which I have a copy of and haven't read yet, but at a much higher pitch of talkative despair, Chaim Herzog, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I guess I'm not. Correct me in the comments. Is a man on a philosophical quest. Much of my life has been spent in the effort to live by more coherent ideas, he tells us. I even know which ones. That's funny. But unlike Bowling, he is in the grip of a crisis that's not merely existential. His wife has left him for somebody he thought was a good friend, taking with her his beloved daughter. This plunges him into a tormented appraisal not only of himself and the people around him, but of nearly everything that has transpired since the Age of Reason got underway. You get to watch him shake his head and sometimes his fist at the world, all the while asking it, unbreak my heart. God, that sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm in. Next, Housekeeping by Marilynne Robinson, 1981. I'm reading a Marilynne Robinson book later this year. I don't remember which one, but it's a buddy read I have scheduled with somebody. Fingerbone is a fictional town in the Pacific Northwest. It rests along a lake that has the distinction of once having claimed an entire train that slid from a bridge into its dark waters one night, taking almost all on board to their deaths. Oh, how awful. Time swallows people in the same way in this sly book. The narrator is Ruth, a teenage girl. She and her sister are raised affectionately but haphazardly by various generations of the women in her all too eccentric family. This is a book about women making homes and leaving them. Even when the girls stay home, the days and nights pass and the plot goes nowhere in particular. Robinson arrives again and again in resounding places. Sounds really good to me. Next, A House for Mr. Biswas. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly or not, but I think I am mispronouncing it. As usual, correct me in the comments. When Mohun Biswas married his wife, Shema, he effectively married her entire family, the daunting, smothering Tulsis. Set in the Hindu community in post-colonial Trivandrum, where Nepal was born, A House for Mr. Biswas is the life story of a man who wanted only a home, but who was a magnet for misfortune, oppression, and humiliation. A wanderer with no place he could call his own, with no family except that which he was to attempt to create out of the engulfing world of the Tulsis. Mohan's survival is a triumph of resilience and persistence and humor, an epic of dignity and self-respect, doggedly clung to. Okay, that sounds good. I, Claudius, Robert Graves, 1934. Been meaning to read it for years. What can I say? Hadn't got to it yet. Though he briefly became Emperor, Claudius, the limping, stuttering grandson of Caesar Augustus, is not your usual Roman on a pedestal. Sly, even bitchy, an appalled observer of his treacherous times, in his voice you hear the worldliness of classical literature with none of its marble officialdom. A member of a ruthless and murderous imperial family, he survives because he seems to all around him the least consequential twig of the family tree. But Claudius bears enduring witness to a moment when the virtues of the Roman Republic, which has already been disposed of by the time he begins his tale, are being lost to the bloodlusts and hubris of the Roman Empire. Yeah, like I say, I've been meaning to read it for a while. Infinite Jest. A lot of times when I make my videos, you'll see a copy of Infinite Jest on the bookshelf behind me, and that's on that bookshelf behind me in plain sight of the camera for a reason. It's because Steve Donahue doesn't like the novel Infinite Jest, and it's there just to tease him. Written by David Foster Wallace. I was going to do this as a buddy read. I even got multiple bookmarks for it, but I was going to do it as a buddy read with my friend Lane, because my friend Lane, his daughter's really into it and made him promise her that he would read it with her. And he's fallen through, and he hasn't. Also, I have a list of books from an ex-girlfriend that I was very, very fond of in the last couple of years. that I asked her to pick out for me to read over the course of a week, and that was one of the books on the list. And I don't know, she must have had high hopes for how many books I could read in a week, because I've only read 2 of them so far, and that's been 2 years ago. I've read some other books besides. So I have to stay hydrated. I took my medication already tonight. The title is a sly wink at the book's massive girth. It's 1,000+ pages in most editions, but the reference to Hamlet is well earned. Moreover, it's a damn funny book. My friend, the school teacher, Will, really loves this book too. The action takes place in Boston at 2 separate but curiously similar venues, an elite tennis academy and a drug rehab facility, in a near future in which calendar years are available for corporate sponsorship. The year of the trial-sized Dove Bar, the year of the Depend adult undergarments, and so on. Okay, that's funny. The plot of Infinite Jest, which revolves around, among other things, a lost, unwatchably beautiful art film and a conspiracy among wheelchair-bound Quebecois secessionists, is decidedly secondary to the painfully funny dialogue and Wallace's endlessly rich ruminations and speculations on addiction, entertainment, art, life, and of course, tennis. Yeah, so I definitely want to read it. It's been on my list for a while now, but it seems like one I'm going to have to pay close attention to, and it might be one where I need a buddy to read it with me. Next, Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, published in 1952. And no, this doesn't have anything to do with the Universal horror movie at all. A nameless young black man wins a tortuous path from a southern town where a local white men's club mockingly awards him a scholarship to a black college, to the streets of New York City, where everybody, black and white, left and right, man and woman, seems to have their own ideas about who he is and what purpose he can serve. Even-handedly exposing the hypocrisies and stereotypes of all comers, Invisible Man is far more than a race novel or even a Bildungsroman. It's the quintessential American picaresque of the 20th century. I know what a Bildungsroman is. Do you? I know what a picaresque novel is. Do you know? If you do, mention it in the comments and explain it to those of us who don't know. I'm not really bragging here. They're, simple enough words to learn, and most of it, I guarantee you 95% of you know what those words mean. I'm just being silly. It's one that's on my TBR and has been for a long time and will probably stay there for a long time. Light in August is next by William Faulkner, 1932. Believe it or not, I've never read anything by Faulkner except for a short story, and I don't remember the name of it. This book, Faulkner's grave meditation on race, violence, and all the fraught legacies of the South, is the first in which he confronted head-on the poisons of racism. Joe Christmas believes himself to be of mixed race. His parentage is uncertain. I love the name Joe Christmas, though. That's great. He's escaped from a miserable childhood to the town of Jefferson, Mississippi, where he unleashes his demons. Lena Grove has come there, too, looking for the father of the child she is carrying, while Christmas fulfills his wretched destiny. God, I hope my destiny isn't wretched, but it might be. I don't know. It hasn't been so far. The book is less daring structurally than The Sound and the Fury or As I Lay Dying, though time still folds back on itself so that events seem to take place in a zone beyond normal chronology. The flashbacks are easier to follow, but the force of Faulkner's genius is entirely in play. All right, sounds pretty good. One of these days I'm going to get to Faulkner. I guess I'm going to finish Hemingway first. Next, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, which I've read, so I get to mark it on my list. I love The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And it is the first book in the Chronicles of Narnia. I don't agree with the renumbering that happened later. 4 English children playing hide and seek accidentally wander through an enchanted wardrobe and into Narnia, a land locked in a deep magical winter by the spells of an evil witch queen. Only the fierce, benevolent lion Aslan, with a little help from the children, can vanquish the tyrant and bring summer back to Narnia and the talking animals who live there. Lewis was a Christian philosopher. And The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the 6 other Narnia novels that follow can be read as Christian morality tales, but they're not just kid stuff. They're really terrific. I was going to read them again last year at Christmas time, but the lady I was buddy reading them with dropped out on me, and so I didn't read them. But maybe this Christmas she'll have a change of heart, and we'll tap into it. But yeah, it's true. All the Narnia movies have been terrible, by the way. Don't bother with any movie with Narnia attached to them. They're awful. Next, Lolita. Okay, Lolita's a pretty good book, but I think it's kind of a better movie. The movie's really funny to me. I'll probably get eggs thrown at me for that, but don't do it. Don't throw eggs at your TV, please. It had a troubled birth. Nabokov almost burned the manuscript of Lolita halfway through, and its first publisher was a French pornographic press. But Lolita would go on to become a huge bestseller and the unlikeliest of American classics. Our hero, who goes by the self-mocking name of Humbert Humbert, is a pedophile. Who would have thought to write a novel about a pedophile as the main character? Well, Nabokov, obviously. But yeah, it is a weird choice. He is a highly cultured, endearingly ironic man, and he loathes himself about as much as a human being can. But he loves, and can only love, nubile young girls whom he calls nymphettes. Lolita is the story of Humbert's romance, if that's the word, which it isn't, with a 12-year-old girl named Dolores Hayes. Their story is as vile and obscene as one can imagine, but Humbert's voice, an endlessly inventive stream of angry, cosmopolitan invective, elevates it to the level of a tragic, twisted epic. Yeah, it's a good book, and it's one I'm going to read again. And yeah, just trust me on that. It seems like it wouldn't be, but it is. It's a really good book. Next up, Lord of the Flies by William Golding, published in 1955. I get to make another mark because I've read this one. I actually hate this book. I've read and reread Lord of the Flies over and over again multiple times. Some of my reading mentors that I dearly love and respect cannot understand why I don't like this novel. I don't know why I don't like this novel. I love the TV show Lost, but the premise is that a plane load of young boys get marooned on a tropical island and they have to fend for themselves. And the childish purity wears away quickly and the boys become two warring tribes. One under the saintly Ralph and his asthmatic sidekick Piggy, and the other one under the savage ex-choir leader Jack. Golding tracks the fall of this new Eden with pitiless, meticulous care and total psychological clarity, and in the process, he ruthlessly strips away the myths and cliches of childhood innocence forever. Yeah, just didn't like the book. I don't think I'm going to try to read it again. I've read it so many times that I don't think I'm going to give it another try. Next, The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I get to mark that one off the list too. I read The Lord of the Rings 6 times before 6th grade. Everybody knows about The Lord of the Rings. The movies were huge blockbuster hits. And they're terrific movies in their own right. But don't let them replace the novels. The novels are really good. Actually, the author, J.R.R. Tolkien, considered it one novel, but it wasn't practical to put that many pages into one volume. And so they split it up into 3 volumes and called it a trilogy. But it's really one big story. And it's absolutely wonderful, start to finish. It's terrific. It is one of the selections for the Lone Star Book Club this year. And if you haven't seen my video about that, just look it up, Lone Star Book Club. You're going to want to participate, trust me. We got a lot of cool books coming up. Loving by Henry Green, 1945. I've never heard of this. Green remains a dim figure for many Americans. He's not dim for me. He's completely unknown to me. He stopped writing in 1952 at the age of 47 with just 9 novels and a memoir behind him. In the last years of his life, he died in 1973. He became a kind of British Thomas Pynchon, agreeing to be photographed only from behind. I've heard of Thomas Pynchon. I've not heard of Henry Green. But those who knew him often revered him. W.H. Auden called him the finest living English novelist. His real name was Henry Vincent York, the son of a wealthy Birmingham industrialist. He was educated at Eton and Oxford, but never completed his degree. He became managing director of the family factory, which made beer bottling machines. But first he spent a year on the factory floor with the ordinary workers, and his fiction is forever marked by an understanding of the English at all levels of society, something rare in class-bound British literature. Okay, so that sounds interesting. Loving is a classic upstairs-downstairs story with the emphasis on downstairs. You see the life of a great Irish country house during World War II through the eyes of its mostly British servants, who make a world of their own during a period when their masters are away. Green's generosity towards even the most scheming and rascally of them offers a lesson you never forget. Okay, yeah, that sounds really good. I want to read it. The Moviegoer by Walker Percy, which we mentioned early, is already on my TBR. It's It's in the other room. It's on my desk. The moviegoer was I read The Stranger by Albert Camus, and I'm supposed to follow it up with The Moviegoer by Walker Percy, and this was at the recommendation of my friend at Better Than Food, which is a terrific channel. You ought to check it out sometime. Better Than Food's really cool. All he does there are movie reviews, or book reviews, by the way. Like, he doesn't do a lot of listicles like I do or anything. He does book reviews. But anyway, I don't know much about this book. What is the nature of the search, you ask? Really, it is very simple, at least for a fellow like me. So simple that it is often overlooked. The search is what anyone would undertake if he were not sunk in the everydayness of his own life. This is Percy's first novel, a philosophical quest, in which the question marks are worn lightly. Binks Bowling is a New Orleans investment broker who chafes over the difficulty of bringing life into high relief. Mere existence lacks flavor. Movies give him a glimpse of a higher possibility. That and sex with his succession of pretty secretaries. Okay, this sounds like a good book to me. But he longs for more, timing's everything, isn't it? But he longs for a more enduring solution. You marvel at how lightly he addresses his displeasures. Percy's book is like Sartre's nausea without the nausea. But Binks is still a man who always has his despair at the ready, and his story can shift towards the tragic with ease. Okay, yeah, I still want to read it. Lucky Jim is next by Kingsley Amis, 1954. Jim Dixie doesn't feel lucky. He's a junior lecturer at a no-account college in provincial England. His daily life is a litany of hilariously, from our perspectives anyway, petty humiliations at the hands of his superiors, notably the odious, conceited Professor Welch, his students, and his codependent sort of girlfriend, Margaret. Jim may be the single bitterest character in all of English literature. Amos certainly crafts the most brutally accurate description of a hangover ever written. Okay, yeah, I want to read this. A punishingly, viscerally funny attack on hypocrisy and self-importance in all their many and varied forms, Lucky Jim gave rise to much of the angry young man fiction that followed, but it never met its equal. Okay, that sounds good. The Man Who Loved Children is next, written by Christina Stead. I don't know anything about this one. It's published in 1940. Though it was first published in 1940, it wasn't until a reissue 25 years later that Stead's novel was recognized for the masterpiece it is. It's a masterpiece. The greatest picture ever of the lousiest family of all time. God, that sounds good already. Sam Pollitt is an exhausting monstrosity of a husband and father. Not always cruel, but always self-regarding. Sam the Bold is his name for himself. I like that. I have a nickname for myself too. It's Randy Tiberius Ray. He's also self-deluding, and he's anything but bold. His wife, Henny, the one he barely speaks to, is nervous, self-pitying, and neurotic, the kind of mother who steals from her children's piggy banks, diverts herself with a half-witted boyfriend, and devolves into a sniffling hag. Oh, this sounds like an awful bunch of people. Their children, 6 of them, are appalled witnesses to the spectacle of their parents' collapse and the helpless recipients of their toxic attentions. Stead, an Australian man with a wonderful style, both headlong and sturdy, is fearless in her depiction of the Pollitts and more compassionate in her judgments than you or I could ever be. When you know how heavily this novel was based upon our own childhood, that compassion seems even more remarkable. Ooh, sounds like a good one. At first, I wasn't sure if that sounded good at all because it sounds like such a horrible family, but it seems like it might be a good novel. Next, Midnight's Children, Salman Rushdie, 1981. I like Salman Rushdie. Rushdie's version of The Prince and the Pauper becomes a cartwheeling parable about the fate of modern India. At the stroke of midnight on August 15th, 1947, the date on which India proclaimed itself independent from Great Britain, 1,001 children are born with supernatural powers. 2 are switched at birth, the illegitimate son of a poor Hindu woman and the offspring of wealthy Muslims. Rushdie follows them through 30 years of partition, violence, and Indira Gandhi's iron-fisted rule. The personal is the political here, with a vengeance. As history becomes farce, becomes legend, becomes memory, becomes history again. Okay, that sounds good. And I like Salman Rushdie. Money by Martin Amis, 1984. You know, with a title like Money, it's almost impossible to not think of the Pink Floyd song, Money. John Self, the extravagantly wretched man at the heart of this wonderfully funny book, is no ordinary pig. A slave to his countless vices, a monster of lustrous indulgence, he's the kind of sleazeball who puts the ID back in idiot, or puts the id back in idiot. I get it. Okay. Took me a minute. I get it. Naturally, he's in the movie business. To be precise, he's a director of TV commercials who's making his first feature while perfecting his gift for self-destruction. Sounds like he could be played in a movie by a young Bill Murray, doesn't he? And by the way, offering what is frequently an astute take on this profane world of ours, self-spectacular lust, his raw craving for money, sex, and stimulants, his low cunning, his sheer bewitching awfulness, somehow it all makes him perfectly irresistible. Sounds good. It's going on the TBR. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, 1925. I've heard of this one. Virginia Woolf, all of her books are on my TBR, and I haven't read any of them yet. Clarissa Dalloway is the kind of woman you would pass on the street without a thought, or would if you lived in London in 1923. Middle-aged, upper middle class, well-married, and well-fed. But Woolf draws aside the veil of her placid exterior to reveal the dreams, fears, foibles, passion, and pain that swirl endlessly just beneath it. Mrs. Dalloway follows Clarissa through the course of a single day, and as she goes about her errands, preparing for a party she's given that night, we drift and rock on the ebb and flow of her lost love for an old flame who resurfaces unexpectedly. Her never consummated lesbian longing for a childhood friend, and her endless yearning for some firm sense of what in the swirling detritus and ephemera that make up daily life is true and good and permanent. Sounds good. Naked Lunch is next by William Burroughs, 1959. I've heard a lot about William Burroughs, but I haven't read anything by him yet. I believe he was part of the Beat generation. An heir to the Burroughs adding machine fortune, Burroughs the novelist hated the despots of Squaresville and the whole world where money makes its fist. This is his greatest book and the template for all the ones that follow. Okay, I want to read it already. With its fractured account of junkies and assorted urbane desperados, its fang-bearing humor, and its sudden excursions into sheer hallucination, it instantly made him the depraved scoutmaster for generations of would-be hipsters. He once said, "My purpose in writing has always been to express human potentials and purposes relevant to the space age," by which he meant addiction and willful extremity, both of which, of course, have turned out to be virtues in the modern market economy. Like Jean Genet, Burroughs traffics in the utmost degradations, but he doesn't go to them looking for unsuspected sources of radiance. He likes them for what they are. His conversations in hell with the Marquis de Sade must be very entertaining. That's pretty good. Native Son by Richard Wright, released in 1940. I think he also wrote a novel called Black Boy, which I read. I haven't read Native Son. It would have been easy to write a book about a black man unjustly accused. Wright wrote the hard one. In Chicago of the 1930s, where Bigger Thomas is found work as a chauffeur, he murders a young white woman, the only child of the wealthy family who has just hired him. Though the killing is accidental, it becomes a kind of retroactive act of will. It leads Thomas to an inquiry into his own injuries and humiliations at the hand of a sometimes literally bloodthirsty white society. There are passages of standard societal preachiness in this book, but Wright brings Bigger's situation into the most uncomfortable places of the American racial standoff. And that's exactly where it had to go. Okay, sounds good. Neuromancer by William Gibson, 1984. All right, here's Cyberpunk at its most famous. I think Neuromancer is considered the first cyberpunk novel. There's no way to overstate how radical Gibson's first and best novel was when it first appeared. It's difficult to understand and get into. I read it twice the first time I read it, and I didn't get it until the second time through. And I don't think I got it 100% then, but it was worth it, and it'd be worth another reread too. I'm gonna do it. He combined a shattered neon-chased postmodern cityscape, its inhabitants rendered demi-human by designer drugs, tattoos, and rampant surgical body modifications, with a vision of a three-dimensional virtual landscape created by networked computers, through which badass bandit hackers roam like high plains drifters. Sounds good, doesn't it? I'm not even going to read the rest of it. That sounds so great. Yeah. If you haven't read Neuromancer by William Gibson, what are you waiting for? It's terrific. You need to do it. Never Let Me Go. Oh, I get to mark my sheet again, too, because I've read that one. Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro was published in 2005. I've seen the movie with my daughter, and we both loved it. We have not read the book yet, although I do have a copy of it. Kathy, Tommy, and Ruth are students at Hailsham, a very exclusive, very strange, and that's saying something, English private school. They are treated well in every respect, but as they grow older, they come to realize that there is a secret that haunts their lives. Their teachers regard them with fear and pity, and they don't know why. Once they learn the secret, it is already far, far too late for them to save themselves. Set in a darkling, alternate universe version of England and told with dry-eyed, white-knuckled restraint, Never Let Me Go is an improbable masterpiece, a science fiction horror story written as high tragedy by a master literary stylist. It's postmodern in its conception, but Ishiguro isn't playing games or chasing trends. The human drama of Never Let Me Go, its themes of atrocity and acceptance, are timeless and sadly permanent. Next, 1984 by George Orwell. I get to mark that one down too because I've read it. 1984, I actually read it in 1984. But it was written far before that. It was published in 1948. But yeah, the time is 13 o'clock. The date doesn't matter. The year goes without saying. Winston Smith is a bureaucrat at the Ministry of Truth. He works day and night in the service of Big Brother, the remote, foe-benign ruler of the eerily familiar dystopia. It's eerie because it's the world we're living in. Dystopias are a lot more fun in fiction than they are in real life, aren't they? Orwell's novel is a study of every possible way a nation can be beaten down by its government, spiritually, physically, intellectually, by the media, torture, surveillance, and censorship, to the point where the state can manipulate reality at will. When Smith is tempted by a beautiful resistance fighter into an act of rebellion, 1984 becomes something more, a strange, tragic, deeply sad love story. It is Orwell's triumph and the century's misfortune that 1984 is as prescient as it is pessimistic. It's really good. On the Road by Jack Kerouac, published in 1957. I have not read On the Road, although I have read its sequel. And I can't remember the name of the sequel. I like the sequel okay, but yeah, I've never read On the Road. It's the book that launched 1,000 trips. For the hyperkinetic, enduring, culture-changing novel, Kerouac admitted whole worlds through his windshield. It's an account of a few pinwheeling characters in perpetual cross-country motion. It's room to spare for rivers, landscapes, starry skies, benzodrine addicts, endless marathons of driving, the hipster demiurge Dean Moriarty, and lots of other fast-talking madmen. Because the only people for me are the mad ones, Kerouac's narrator says, Sal Paradise. The ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved. Capote's famous put down of the book got it exactly backwards. That's not typing, Truman, that's writing. I don't know. I didn't like On the Road that much. I don't think I'm going to reread it. Well, I didn't read On the Road. I've started it and never finished it, but I read the sequel, and I still can't remember the name of the sequel. The Dharma Bums, which I didn't much care for either, even though one of the characters was based on one of my favorite poets, Gary Snyder. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is one that I've read. Also a great movie, starring Jack Nicholson. Written by Ken Casey, published in 1962. It's about the author's own experiences as a test subject in a mental hospital. The irrepressible inmate. Don't you just love the word irrepressible? It always makes me think of that guy who got the Academy Award for The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. You know, that guy's irrepressible. The irrepressible inmate Randall McMurphy does battle with the icy, power-mad Nurse Ratched. What a great name, Nurse Ratched. To liberate or at least breathe a little life into the crushed and cowed patient she lords it over. Yeah, it's a really good book. No problem at all reading that one again. The Painted Bird is next, which I have not read. Jerry Kosinski is the name of the author. It was released in 1965. I believe I saw a YouTube video today where someone was pointing out the cover of The Naked Bird and what a great cover it had. But we don't judge books by their covers, do we? The onset of World War II cuts a young Jewish boy off from his family and sets him adrift among the peasants of rural Poland. Now, you may not know this about me, but I am of Polish ancestry. And my mother used to make a Polish recipe for cabbage soup that was just awful. She thought she was a marvelous cook, but she was not. But she was definitely at her worst when she made cabbage soup. And she used to tell me, she'd say, Randy, she said, someday I'm going to be gone and you're going to miss this cabbage soup. And she was wrong. She's gone, but I miss her. I don't miss her cabbage soup at all. I'd choke it down if I could hang out with her for an afternoon. Next, Pale Fire, also by Vladimir Nabokov. I don't know anything about this one. But if it's as good as Lolita, I'd read it. I'd give it a try. It's called A Bizarre Three-Legged Race of a Novel, composed of a long narrative poem followed by a much longer set of footnotes, written by an obsessive, increasingly deranged annotator. Okay, this sounds good. Sounds weird, but sounds good. Charles Skinboat's a gay professor at a small New England college, and he may or may not be a noble-born expatriate from the exotic Eastern Europe principality of Zembla. Nabokov's a good writer. I would definitely give it a try. A Passage to India is next by E.M. Forster, 1924. By the time the greatest Edwardian novelist in his last and best of his novels published in his lifetime, he addressed himself to the British presence in India. His moral sense was more fully equipped than ever. Yeah, it looks good. I saw a movie based on an E.M. Forster novel, but it wasn't this one. But it had Redford in it. I can't remember. But it sounds like it'd be worth a try. Play It As It Lays is next by Joan Didion. Love Joan Didion. What a great writer. I haven't read anything by Joan Didion that wasn't good. But I haven't read this one. But it's going on the TBR list because she's a good writer. Didion's mordant lucidity is like LA sunlight, a thing so bright, sometimes it hurts. She is a descendant of the old California, the great-great-granddaughter of pioneers. But she was also schooled at Berkeley and in the literary circles of Paris and New York, so she's fully versed in the predicaments of a shaky modernity that she does not care for in the least. Okay, yeah, I'd like to read that. That sounds good. Portnoy's Complaint by Philip Roth. Okay, so I read this one, but I'm not sure that I ever finished. So I'm not going to give myself credit for it. And I'd like to read it again. Of course it's vulgar. How could it not be? It's a sustained cry of a ferociously perplexed, ferociously lucid New York City Jew. What did you expect, Jane Austen? Roth's barbaric yawp of a book, nice, was a literary instance of shock and awe, a dirty comic masterpiece that can stand with Tristram Shandy. For the masturbation scenes alone, it will endure forever. I think it's all masturbation scenes. That's all I remember from it. And I remember thinking, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a prude by any means, but it just doesn't seem like the subject for a novel. But like I said, I'm going to give it another try because I'm open-minded. So, Possession is next by A.S. Byatt. I have a copy of this here. I haven't read it yet. Published in 1990. And it looks good. Academics were sexy long before Sophie and Robert from the Da Vinci Code. I agree. I've always liked academics. Roland is a beleaguered graduate student laboring in the British Library, and our heroine, Maud, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, is an icy repressed professor at a provincial English university. By chance, they jointly stumble on a cache of hot-blooded love letters by a famous, albeit fictional, Victorian poet named Randolph Ashe. This sounds really good. I have it. It's on my TBR already. Their discovery lights the fuses on both a literary mystery and their own slow-burning romance, which Byatt adroitly braids together with the story of Ashe's love letter. Okay, this sounds really good. It's on my TBR, but it's moving up the list. This might even be a candidate for the Lone Star Book Club. The Power and the Glory is next, written by Graham Greene. You already know how I feel about him, 1939. This is another Graham Greene novel that I've never heard of, which is weird since he's one of my favorite writers. Intricate moral landscape, corrupt characters who still might be capable of goodness, virtuous characters indulging their virtues murderously. The central figure, I like this. The central figure is a whiskey priest on the run in Mexico in the 1930s during years when the Catholic Church was being suppressed by the Mexican government. I'm in, but I'm going to read everything by Graham Greene anyway, so it was automatically on the TBR. The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, I love that title, by Muriel Spark, published in 1961. I have not read this. It's a slender novel, but far from flimsy. The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie enrolls the reader at Edinburgh's fictional Marcia Blaine School for Girls under the tutelage of one Jean Brodie, a magnetic, unconventional instructor whose favorite pupils, the Brodie set, are set apart from the rest of the student body by their superior attitudes and their intellectual awareness. Okay, yeah, sounds great. I want to read it. Rabbit Run by John Updike. I've read this one. I don't like John Updike. Might give it another shot. Maybe I'll like John Updike now that I'm a middle-aged man, but I sure didn't like it as a young man. He wrote a series of books about a character named Harry Rabbit Angstrom, an ignorant, philandering 20-something ex-jock. Long past his high school glory days and feels trapped in a job and a marriage, a town, and a family that bore him. Yeah, it bored me too. In a situation like that, running away is exactly what comes naturally to him. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. There's a lot of other books that are coming first. Ragtime by E.L. Doctorow is next, 1975. E.L. Doctorow is a good writer. This is a fever dream of the American past, remade into a historical novel. Spans first decades of the 20th century and three groups of fictional characters: a white middle-class family, a family of Jewish immigrants, and an African-American couple. And their lives are all intertwined with each other, and some of the great public figures of the day include Harry Houdini, Emma Goldman, Henry Ford, and Sigmund Freud. They're all part of the novel. Okay, so yeah, this sounds really good. It's going on the TBR. The Recognitions by William Gaddis, 1955. You approach this immense book wondering whether you should have done a week of road work and calisthenics to get ready for it, and not just because it is more than 900-page length. Okay, so I guess this would qualify for March of the Mammoths. Anyway, yeah, I'd like to see this one, or read this one. It sounds good. There's an art dealer with expert counterfeits in it. Sounds something like a story I read not too long ago from Amor Tolls. Yeah, but I want to check it out. Red Harvest is next on the list. That's by Dashiell Hammett from 1929. It is on my TBR list. I'm familiar with it, but have not read it yet. I have a copy of it here. It was made into a samurai movie called Yojimbo, which was eventually converted into a Western. And I believe the Western was the Man with No Name trilogy. It was I think it was the first one, but it might have been the second one. Where did we first hear the voice of the world-weary American tough guy in its purest distillation? In Dashiell Hammett, a former Pinkerton detective, and in this book, his first novel. It's less famous than The Maltese Falcon or The Thin Man. Both have pitch-perfect movie adaptations. This tale of omnidirectional treachery is the man at his deadly best. Yeah, I'd like to see that. Yeah, definitely. Revolutionary Road is next. Author is Richard Yates, 1961. I think they made a movie out of it. I think I checked out the movie and didn't like it. We think of Updike and Cheever as the masters of post-war American suburbia, of its sunlit euphorias and its drunken discontents. Let's add Yates to the master list and subtract the euphorias. His great novel is a bitterly funny and bitterly unfunny account of lethal disappointment in the Connecticut suburbs in 1955. When they were single and in love, Frank and April Wheeler thought of themselves as different, smarter, hipper, more alive. Then comes marriage and the steamroller of daily existence. Boy, this sounds too true. His job for a big company, her wife, and motherhood. The rewards of the material life seem like small compensation for the daily blows to the ego, which eventually detonate their lives. This may sound like a common predicament, but Yates gives it uncommon force. Though none of his 6 other novels enjoys the enduring prestige of this one, it doesn't matter. If Revolutionary Road doesn't make him an immortal, immortality isn't worth having. The Sheltering Sky is next. Paul Bowles is the author, published in 1949. It's a very strange book and a very seductive one. Port Mosby and his wife Kit are traveling to North Africa with their annoying friend Tunner. They turn out to be en route to oblivion, a passage that brings them up against the desert, the Arabs, the French colonizers, a very unsavory mother-son combination, and their enigmatic selves. Bowles lived much of his life in Tangiers, knew the enticing otherness of Algeria and Morocco, enough to know that you can write about it in straightforward, unadorned prose, and still not fail to convey its treacherous beguilements. The last of this book's 3 sections, when Kit is given over in her fate in the desert, is one of the damnedest things you'll ever read. I'd like to read it. Next is Slaughterhouse-Five, which I have, of course, read. It's Kurt Vonnegut, after all. But you know, here's the thing about Slaughterhouse-Five. I think it's overrated. It's okay if you like Kurt Vonnegut, and some people don't even like Kurt Vonnegut. But it ain't Cat's Cradle. And Cat's Cradle is a far superior novel. Cat's Cradle is the best thing Kurt Vonnegut ever wrote. But I think this one they kind of rate it higher because of the historical aspect of it, Cat's Cradle's not really a historical novel, and this one is kind of a historical novel. It's about Billy Pilgrim, who's become unstuck in time. He keeps reliving episodes of his life, but in no particular sequence. And he's captured by some aliens called Trifomidorians, which I thought was pretty clever and cool. But it's his traumatic service in World War II, where he lives through the firebombing of Dresden repeatedly. That's the core of the novel. Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson. I have a copy of this. I haven't read it yet. I've read part of it. The main character is named Hero Protagonist. I'm not joking about that. This, like Neuromancer is an early cyberpunk novel. Hero Protagonist is a freelance hacker. He's also an unemployed pizza delivery man. And he's lost in a post-lapsarian, whatever that means, hyper-capitalist future America in which the central government has withered away, leaving behind a landscape of gated communities and endless strip malls lined with cookie-cutter retail franchises. When a virulent computer virus, or is it a drug or a religion, called Snow Crash gets loose and somehow starts infecting humans, Hero teams up with a sassy skateboard messenger to save both the real world and cyberspace. Stevenson is that rare, no unique thing, both a virtuous literary stylist and a consummate observer of a brave new world, where information flows freely between humans and computers to the point where the two are no longer easily distinguishable. Yeah, I need to finish it. It's good. The Sotweed Factory is next by John Barth, published in 1960. I don't know anything about it. It's described as a feast here. Dense, funny, endlessly inventive, and okay, yes, long-winded. This satire of the 18th century picaresque novel, there's that word again, picaresque. Think Fielding's Tom Jones or Stern's Tristram Shandy, is also an earnest picture of the pitfalls awaiting innocence as it makes its unsteady way in the world. It's the late 17th century, and Ebenezer Cook is a poet, a dutiful son and determined virgin. Who's a determined virgin? The only determined virgins I know are the ones who are determined to lose their virginity, who travels from England to Maryland to take possession of his father's tobacco or sotweed plantation. He's also eventually given to believe that he has been commissioned by the 3rd Lord Baltimore to write an epic poem. But things are not always what they seem. Boy, could you not say that about any novel, though? Things are not as they seem. Yeah, this looks pretty good. I'd read it. The Sound and the Fury is next. The Sound and the Fury, of course, is William Faulkner novel from 1929. Flannery O'Connor's nickname for Faulkner was the Dixie Limited, and she didn't mean it entirely kindly. His huge talent and towering ambition made him a literary freight train that other Southern writers were often forced to dodge. Yeah, I'll get to it. I'll get to all of Faulkner if I live long enough. He's not high on my list. The Sports Writer by Richard Ford came out in 1986. Frank Bascom is scrupulously out of touch with himself. Devastated by the death of his young son, divorced now from his wife, he's tiptoeing his way through bereavement using work, he's a magazine writer, to dislodge his grief, self-medicating with a strenuously pursued normalcy. In this beautifully calibrated book, he finds his way to something like peace, which is a different matter. Ford is masterful at describing hard-won and precarious emotional equilibriums of a kind you very well may recognize as your own. This book led to a no less brilliant sequel, Independence Day, as portraits of a man who has lingered in despair but who refuses in the end to remain there. They have no equal. Okay, that sounds good. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. Did I read this? I did read this. Yeah, I read this earlier this year, or we had Dr. November. It was either this year or last year. But Dr. November is an event where we read spy fiction. Get it? Dr. November. I remember it was good. It was kind of a slow burn. It certainly isn't a James Bond book, but I remember liking it. John le Carré wrote several spy novels, and I believe this was the first one that featured, I can't remember the name of the character now, but he's Smiley. George Smiley's in a bunch of spy books, but he's not a major character in this book. The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway came out in 1926. It's about Jake Barnes, a working journalist, expatriate, and tough talker, tragic hero. He was wounded in the war. He was basically gelded. Ooh. So he spends his time in Paris getting drunk in cafes nursing his ennui, I love that, bantering with his hard-boiled friends, and mooning over his unconsummatable love for a beautiful, aristocratic Englishwoman named Brad Ashley, who dines on men 3 meals a day. I haven't read this one, but I want to. And then let's see, Their Eyes Were Watching God, Zora Neale Hurston. I've read something by Zora Neale Hurston. Yeah, this was it. I read it in college. I'm going to give myself credit for it, even though I don't remember it very well. There is no agony, Hurston once wrote, like learning an untold story inside you. Janie Crawford, 40-ish, with her, quote, firm buttocks like she had grapefruits in her hip pockets, her, quote, unquote, pugnacious breasts, and her imperial self-possession, has survived the most tempestuous years of her life, buried 3 husbands, and returned home to tell the story, or at least to tell it to her best friend Phoebe, who Janie knows will relay it to the curious but envious townfolk in the African-American enclave of Eatonville in the Florida Everglades. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I'd read it again. I remember liking it when I read it in college. I just don't remember any of the details. Things Fall Apart by Chichewa Achebe. I've got it over there. I don't know what it's about, and I haven't read it yet. It's a novel of great power that turns the world upside down. I could ask for anything more from a novel than that. Set in the 1890s and was released in 1959. Next is To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay, now I've definitely read this one multiple times, and I love it. I love it almost as much as I love The Great Gatsby. Definitely a candidate for Great American Novel. The movie's wonderful with Gregory Peck. I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine anybody watching this video not knowing anything about To Kill a Mockingbird. But if you haven't read it and you haven't seen the movie, it's written by Harper Lee and published in 1960. It's set in a deeply racist South, and the town leading citizen attorney defends a black man who's accused of rape. And he's played by Gregory Peck, and he's just wonderful. There's a scene in the movie where he stands up to walk out of the courtroom, and all the black people in the courtroom stand up, and they tell his daughter, Scout, stand up. And she says, how come? And she says, your daddy's walking by. Really great stuff. Next, To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, 1927. We already talked about this. I'm planning to read everything by Virginia Woolf, so this goes on the list. Tropic of Cancer by Henry Miller, 1934. I don't know anything about it, but I think it's supposed to be erotic. Could be wrong. This is not a book in the ordinary sense of the word. No, this is a prolonged insult, a gob of spit in the face of art, a kick in the pants to God, man, destiny, time, love, beauty. And that was Miller. In other words, it's a bum's manifesto, the greatest imaginable. Miller discourses on his life and low life in Paris, fashioning his experiences, reflections, orgasms, and philosophizing into a shambling narrative. It's impossible to outdo George Orwell's wonderfully overstated appraisal of Miller in 1940. Quote, the only imaginative prose writer of the slightest value has appeared among the English-speaking races in some time. But it's hard not to agree. He's the thinking man's slacker, but his prose is a force multiplier, lucid, honest, unhampered by neurotic self-loathing. It's not published in the United States until 1961, where it set off an obscenity trial that is still one of the great episodes in the history of free speech. Before Kerouac, before Burroughs, Miller disputed all the imperatives of capitalism. He stood before the temple of money and raised the flag of happiness. You got a problem with that? Next, Ubik by Philip K. Dick. I've read Ubik. Read it as part of my book club. Used to own a bookstore, don't you know? And this was published in 1969. I've read several Philip K. Dick novels. He's an interesting writer. I don't know that this would have been the one that I would have chosen. But I don't remember it being a not bad novel. An accident has occurred. Joe Chip and his colleagues, all but one of them, have narrowly escaped an explosion at a moon base. Or is it the other way around? Did Joe and the others die? And did the one fatality, Glenn Runciter, actually survive? If Glenn is dead and Joe alive, why does Joe keep getting weird messages from Glenn? Is Joe's experience of his post-accident life just a hallucination, played out as his flash-frozen body lies in suspended animation? Joe's reality begins to fall apart, and a mysterious, vaguely mystical substance called Ubik, available in a handy spray can, appears to be the only thing that can stabilize it. From the stuff of space opera, Dick spins a deeply unsettling existential horror story, a nightmare you'll never be sure you've woken up from. And that's the thing about Philip K. Dick novels. They're all pretty much existential horror stories, and they're all about, the nature of reality. So yeah, that's a good one. Under the Net by Iris Murdoch, 1954. I don't know anything about this, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Iris Murdoch wrote crime novels. I may be wrong about this. Okay, so Murdoch, a philosophy don at Oxford, was that rarity, a philosophical novelist who could create real characters, not premises with names attached. Born in Ireland, she revered Wittgenstein, who fostered her contempt for abstractions. Her title refers to the net he believed language cast over truth. She also wrote the first English language elucidation of Sartre, whose existentialism was behind her sharp appreciation of the human potential for leaps into the void. But it was as a novelist that she will be remembered. Until she began sinking into Alzheimer's in the mid-90s, she maintained a ferocious output. This was the first of her 26 novels. About a circle of bewildered and lovesick friends and acquaintances in London with excursions into anesthetics and left-wing politics. Right out of the gate, she displayed all her sinuous gifts, her questing mind, her comic skepticism, her wildly entangled plots. Now I want to read all 26 of her novels. They sound great. And none of them sound like crime novels. Under the Volcano is next, by Malcolm Lowry. I have a copy of it right over there. Still haven't read it. I understand that in the movie version of Under the Volcano, Peter Finch stars, and he's a drunk, he's an alcoholic, and that Nicolas Cage studied his performance in Under the Volcano to inform his own performance in Leaving Las Vegas. To describe his perennial theme, Lowry once borrowed the words of the critic Edmund Wilson: the forces in man which cause him to be terrified of himself. You see exactly what he means in this coruscating novel, which traces the last 24 hours in the life of Jeffrey Furman, once the British consul in a hellish Mexican town, and now a dedicated but utterly cogent alcoholic in that same town, on a day when his ex-wife is returned in a futile attempt to reach out to him. Yeah, that one's going to be good. Watchmen. Okay. Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, 1986. All right, so I read Watchmen when it came out in 1986. I was 16 years old. It's amazing. Yeah, don't let the fact that it's a quote-unquote comic book fool you. It's a graphic novel, but it is one of the most densely textured and richest experiences of a novel that you'll ever read. Pay attention to every picture and every panel, and read it. You should not miss it. Yeah, I was absolutely obsessed with it when I was growing up. So I'm going to mark that as one that I've read too. And then White Noise, which I have a copy of right over here, by Don DeLillo, 1985, was recently made into a film. Affable Jack Gladney is a professor of Hitler studies at a small Midwestern college. His life is upended when a deadly chemical spear near his home creates what the authorities delicately term an airborne toxic event. Airborne toxic event is in caps, so it's important. Gladney succumbs to anger and paranoia, and his wife, Babette, starts taking an experimental drug designed to do away with the fear of death. It's pitched at a level of absurdity slightly above that of real life, but it captures the quality of daily existence in media-saturated, hyper-capitalistic, postmodern America so precisely that you don't know whether to laugh or whimper. Yeah, I'm in. I need to read that one. White Teeth is next, by Zadie Smith. Came out in the year 2000. I believe Sadie Smith just wrote a book called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, but I may be wrong. This may be the first novel ever written that truly feels at home in our borderless, globalized, intermarried, post-colonial age, populated with children with first and last names on a direct collision course. Published when Smith was just 24, White Teeth follows the friendship of two Londoners, a pub-going, working-class bloke named Archie and a Muslim from Bangladesh named Samad. Sounds good. Wide Sargasso Sea is the last one on the list. We've finished. Authors Jean Rhys, 1966. In Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, Bertha is the madwoman locked in the attic by her husband Rochester, the simmering Englishman whose children Jane has been hired to tutor. In Bronte's novel, we learn little about Bertha, other than that she's a monster who must be bound with rope, a white woman from the Caribbean whom Rochester was long ago pressured into marrying for her money. But Rhys, who grew up in the French Caribbean colony of Dominica, presses on the silences in Bronte to give Bertha her own story. Caliban does not become Ariel here, but Rhys turns a menacing cipher into a grieving, plausible young woman. and one whose story says whole worlds about global mixtures, about the misunderstandings between the colonizers, and the people who can't easily say which they are. So that, folks, are the quote-unquote 100 greatest novels since the dawn of Time magazine. And as I predicted, and I nailed it this time, I've read 20 of them, exactly 20 of them, which leaves 80 of them that I haven't read. So much to read, so little time. But what a glorious world to live in where I have the time and the ability to read all these. So until the next video, which is coming very soon, I promise, stay sexy, stay hydrated. That last part, staying hydrated, is actually really, really important to your health. Thanks for watching, and please leave a comment. Let me know which book sounded interesting to you and that you might pick up and read. And I'll see you next time.